Welcome to Meadowlarkers 51. We are joined by the usual crew, Howard Bryant, Amin Hassan. I missed y'all last week. We had a little NWSL conversation at 50.
At
And
50,
we,
which was
yep,
appropriate that it was yours. You know, a little Title 950 as well. So take the
yeah,
50. I know you're not a numbers person, but
no.
you, Kate Fagan, were the honorary captain.
Yeah, and I shared it with the Admiral,
With,
David Robinson,
with David
which,
Robinson, yes.
I mean, I thought was a pretty solid 50. Do we have any 51s?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't come prepared, but Howard, I know you know.
We got tons of 51s. We could go easily with the great Dick Butkus, the maybe the greatest middle linebacker of all time. We could obviously go with Randy Johnson, who is a
Mm,
photographer now for NFL Films, I
Mm,
believe, in his
How
second act.
crazy is that?
How crazy is that? The 6'10" photographer in
wow.
the photo pit. We could go with the great center fielder for the New York Yankees, Bernie Williams, or of course
Yep.
Ichiro Suzuki, Trevor Hoffman.
Oh my
A
gosh.
lot of 51s.
Yeah.
So
Howard,
many
did you
51s.
be honest? Did you Google?
No,
Oh my God, the brain, the numbers brain. Amin, are you impressed too, or
no.
this is
He's
how your
so
brain
N-
works as
unimpressed.
well?
I'm not because the Randy Johnson thing happened. Well, I saw that little news bite from a couple weeks ago, and so then I did a radio bit where we were talking about when
Killed the bird.
he no when he pitched for the Mariners against the Yankees, and it felt like he pitched 7 times in a 5 game series. I still don't know how he did, but every time I turn around, there's Randy Johnson pitching again. I'm like, how is this possible?
That had to be the
So
01 when he was pitching for the Diamondbacks.
no, that was 96, 95, 95. The
That was
first
a
year of the
five
wild
game
card.
series.
Yeah. But he pitched
Yeah.
about 17 times easily. And then that, of course, got me thinking about Bernie Williams, who I know wore 51. So Butkus, though, did not know about Butkus.
Yeah, let's go with Butkus. I feel like that. I just saying his name is fun, and we liked, is this not a culture that honors our elders? So I
That's
feel like
right. Even
we
though I
should do
did put it
that.
on the poll, Kate, and Ichiro blew everybody away, but I think that's recency bias.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I think
and
it's
people
a
said
good.
he's the only guy with the one who's a one namer, but that's not true because Butkus is a one namer. He's a one last
Oh, for
namer though.
sure, for
Absolutely.
sure.
You know,
And there's like a curious juxtaposition between honoring our elders and Dick Butkus for episode 51 and the topic of today's show, which is youth sports. And this is, I don't think this isn't a topic that I think we need some crucial news peg because it is in my, when I pay attention to it, it's like a constant source of curiosity, frustration, I'm perplexed by youth sports. It's really in our wheelhouse of talking about empire, power, dynamics, corruption, all of that. I was reading an article on the Atlantic though, which got me thinking about maybe on Meadowlarkers we should tackle this topic. There's an article on the Atlantic, the downside of having an athlete in the family, which was a curious title for an article because culturally, I don't think many people actually have the instinct that like having a great athlete in your family, there is downside. We're usually talking about how cool it is and how much
Right.
cultural capital you get if you're a good athlete as a kid, because this is talking about being a kid. And I was reading another article which I thought brought up a great point about youth sports. It was talking about how if you're trying to find a place for your 10, 11-year old to play sports, and they want it to be a little more serious than like going to the Y on Saturday morning, but they also don't want to be on a travel 5 times a week, AAU
Hmm.
circuit team. There's like no middle ground. Like, hey, I want to practice once a week and play once a week. It's like that middle ground in youth sports has been obliterated. So I think also coming on the heels of the NWSL topic, which does have a lot to do with the youth sports of soccer and the coaching and the grooming. There's just so much ground to cover when it comes to where we are in youth sports. So I mean, I know that I assume some of your kids have played. I don't know, Howard, if any of your kids are playing youth sports, but as someone who's been through the machine of youth sports, what was your experience and how do you think about this?
well, for me, well, I only have one child, and the last thing he would do is go anywhere near sports, which was kind of fun. You know, talk about a juxtaposition. And so in his case, you know, we played a little basketball early, a little t-ball later, a little hardball later, and then it was to the piano. And then of course there was some tennis, but it just wasn't, it was not his thing. For me growing up, obviously, when you were talking about middle ground, I'm wondering if there ever was a middle ground. I think that I think the ground has shifted. I think it shifted from all or nothing high school to all or nothing travel team in terms of the amount of commitment. It's been really interesting to me talking to some of my other friends who are now experiencing the empty nest and talking about how their freshman children are now navigating that first year of college. And one of the first things that they've been talking about, at least on a half dozen occasions over the past couple of months since school started up, was the recognition that now that they're not in high school, and obviously there's not a whole lot, if you go to a D1 school, there's not a whole lot in between playing and then playing at the highest level, how much time all this has consumed, how much it takes, how much it just obliterates everything else, to the point of what? Because very few people are going to have that next level experience anyway. So it's been really interesting listening to some of my friends talk about how their kids are recognizing, I don't have to do this. There's no next end game for me. There's no reason to play 7 days a week. There's no reason to do any of this because I'm not going anywhere anyway, which is a very strange way to look at sports, but an appropriate way too.
Yeah.
The I disagree with you, Howard, in terms of
I didn't make a point.
You did make a point. You said, well, it was high school before, and now it's club, but it was always extreme. I don't think it was always extreme.
Time consumption wise.
I think the time consumption is higher because high schools, school sports have seasons and have limitations on how many games you're going to play, right? AAU teams, they go to a tournament, they're playing 7-8 games a day. I mean, that's something that when I was growing up really wasn't a big thing. And I just think the other thing is, it through my prism, I grew up and sports was something that we played regardless of whether there was a referee and a league and a buzzer, and it was just, we did it. Vacant lots and playgrounds and all, we were playing all the time. And it feels like, to me, maybe this is just the cul-de-sac that I live in with my family, but it feels like the only opportunities for kids now to play is in some sort of structured, organized environment. Within that regard, it is kind of frightening how, like you said, there's no middle ground. I want my kid to play. I just don't want to be stuck going to practices every day and X amount of games on the weekend. And there's another part of this where I wonder, if I did anything else for a living, would I feel differently? Meaning, my oldest is in basketball now, and I'm as hands off when it comes to participation with the team, with the practices, with the games. I don't, maybe a little bit of advice here and there after the game or after practice, but I'm not doing anything within those hours. But we wake up every morning and we go out to the court and we work like at 6 a.m. And part of me is like, am I pushing too much? I mean, and then my part of me is like, well, will my kid grow up saying, yeah, my dad worked in pro basketball and was in basketball media for a living, and never, ever, ever did we do anything basketball related. It was almost like, hey, yeah, my dad was Albert Einstein, but we didn't really do much physics in the house. I'm more of an art major. Would there be a regret down the line that there's this resource in your house that never made itself available because trying to overcorrect from the stereotype of, oh, I love basketball, so we're gonna be like Jesus Shuttlesworth and Jake Shuttlesworth doing stuff at like midnight. So it's a weird kind of dynamic for me, but I go back to the original thing, which is within the context of interscholastic sports, where there's been massive cutbacks across schools in this country to those types of programs, PE programs, team sports, due to budget cuts. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, athletes would be in basketball, for instance, and then basketball season would be over, and then you'd be on the track team, and then you'd be in baseball, and et cetera, et cetera. And now that has been replaced by this hyper focused, hyper specialization that you're playing basketball year round or you're playing soccer year round.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, I think that one of the big issues for me when we were talking about this topic, it really, to me, I think two things jumped out, and hopefully we'll get into them. One, of course, is what we're talking about right now, but the other part is the adult piece of it too. When you have the athlete who is the family engine, and then that's like the secondary piece of it. Then all of this investment, it's all on you to we want the return on investment, like everything that we're talking about now is supposed to at some level have some sort of payoff. But before we get into that, I wanted to finish up on what Amin was saying, and then Kate, you definitely jump in on this. Was this hyper specialization? To me, it always comes back to Tiger Woods, and it always comes back to that Earl Woods interview about putting a golf club in his hand and going on the Mike Douglas show when he was 3 years old, and the whole thing, and that the parent truly believes they can create the athlete. Can we create the super athlete? And then it creates the byproduct of that is the creation of an industry, right? So it is cutbacks, it is all of those different things, but it's also the professionalizing of youth sports at a really really early age.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many conversation I've overheard with parents where you can see what they're doing is they're trying to use the powers of deduction to figure out what lane their child would have the most chance for future success in. So, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't quite understand.
Richard Williams, line one, right? I mean, those two parents as well.
And I always kind of sit there, we also, I think it was like 20 years ago, we started to have those labs that developed where you could take your kid there and they'd do oxygen tests and running tests, and they'd be like, your child is actually best suited for tennis or soccer based on their physical reflexes. And you're like, shouldn't we let the child's love of something, if it's there, drive what sport they do? But did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no. There's this documentary called In Search of Greatness. I saw this maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and they sat down with like Wayne Gretzky and Pele and Jerry Rice and all these other athletes who are considered to be the greatest of the greats who have ever done what they do. And one of the things they found was that most of these athletes were not one sport athletes growing up. And the one that stuck out to me to this day is Gretzky talking about, I grew up, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, right? Like that was my favorite sport. Like we play hockey when hockey season was over. Said I threw the stick and the pads in the basement, and then I didn't look at them until summer was over. I grabbed my mitt and we were playing baseball. And so part of that, what you're saying there, Kate, about the idea of like let the kid choose what they want to participate in. Like ultimately it finds a way through, as opposed to what they do in China, which is they do exactly that. They select by, or not select, they select and divert athletes or prospective athletes into the sports that they think they'll do best in. It's one of the reasons why when you look at Chinese basketball, there's a dearth of good guard play. And the reason why is because all of the kids who are projected to be of, the 6'2" or whatever and fairly nimble and agile are shoved into other sports. The ones that they earmark for basketball are 6'7", 6'8", and taller. And so they lack, a natural crop of guards because of this kind of centrally planned economy.
But I want to go back. I mean, that's a good point about, I feel like somewhere like China might do it in a more regulated way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we have started to do that here, but in a sort of cultural way where it may not be like the government has selected you because you have shown propensity for, but I don't think we're letting kids self-select as much. There's so much cultural benefit or even familial benefit within your family. If you're really good at baseball and then you realize, I'm like, my parents are very happy because I play well in baseball, but I actually love this other sport I'm not as good at, but I don't get the cultural rewards. in that. So maybe baseball is how I'm going to get the kind of love and reward from my family that I want, which is a different kind of self-selecting. I'm not saying it's as extreme as somewhere like China, but I think we have started to do that, where like the Wayne Gretzky model might not be happening here anymore. But
No,
you don't think it is either, right? I mean, you think
no,
that that
yeah, because
is the thing of the
because we're at a
past.
point. If the next Wayne Gretzky, his parents are like, "Holy shit, he's good at hockey, 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 hockey,
Yeah,
hockey, hockey, hockey,
until he
hockey."
quits at
What
age
baseball? No,
15,
right?
and then we never see Wayne Gretzky.
Or and I'm glad that the article you sent us mentioned this. Or even the ones who are like, no, this is great, I love playing the sport. We're seeing serious injuries earlier and earlier in these athletes' career because of overuse, because they don't cross train. If I'm a tennis player, for instance, that repetitive motion is wearing the hell out of my elbow. Like it's we see a lot of ACL injuries in youth basketball. And like that's something that it's exploded over the last 30 years, where this was almost unheard of a kid undergoing ACL repair. Now it's very, very commonplace, and it's because of these overuse injuries, because they're doing the same thing over and over again, and the human body is not made to withstand that much overuse in a specific way.
Yes, but what?
So
Go
I
ahead,
want
Kate.
to go ahead. I wanted to just, Amin, you said something when you were first talking about how when you were growing up, you just played where playing happened.
Mm-hmm.
You and I think I don't know if I've shared this on Meadowlarkers. Apologies if I had, but I think that's such a crucial point. Is what you are describing is like the sociologists have named free play, like
Mm-hmm.
play that you engage in as a kid, where there's no adults, there's no cones, there's no organization to it. And it looks like capture the flag, it looks like pick up sandlot baseball, it looks like pick up basketball, where you're making your own rules and there's no adults present.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of play, to the discussion of this middle ground of playing in America and youth sports in America, that kind of free play has decreased steadily over the last 30 years. And some of it would be, some people would chalk it up to like in the 70s and 80s, where there was like, we had our crime worries, and it was like, don't let your kids be gone, right? Like until the dinner bell rings, like you actually have to know where they are. So there's been less and less of this free play. And I think this is a crucial element to youth sports, because like I look at my nephew, for example, he's 10. He should pretty much only be participating in free play at this point. Like, okay, maybe on Saturdays you play Little League, but otherwise, like, you should be out in the park in the afternoon. But like, that's not how he engages in sports. He has been engaging in adult regulated sports since he was 6, and almost very little free play. And I think this does matter, because I think when there are no adults, like, you have to make decisions yourself as a kid. You learn a lot of valuable lessons. There's not as much pressure, or it's a different kind of pressure. It's more of a peer related pressure. And I think that the fact that kids don't have this as much anymore, and they're so focused on extreme youth sports, is affecting like burnout, mental health, enjoyment, generally speaking, of the games that we have like long thought should be fun to play, that have become less and less fun.
Yeah, I would say too. The other piece of that is the roots of this are all the same. The root of it is the same, which is the professionalizing and the turning this into an industry, so much to the point where free play seems to be its own phenomenon, like it's the oasis. No, that's the norm, right? That is always supposed to have been the norm, which is we all did, very similarly to what Amin did, at least when I was growing up. We played. Not only did we play, but we didn't have. It was like Charlie Brown. Like, you couldn't understand what the adults were saying, because you're not supposed to understand them, because they're not part of this.
Yeah.
There's the genius in that cartoon, in that the adults are foreign. They're not part of this ecosystem. And when you hear that foreign voice, nobody understands it, because they're not part of the action. Today, the adults are the action. Today the adults are the center of the action. try playing anything without a grown up somewhere. And all of this to me still does come back to the same thing, which is the empire piece of it, that this, where sports fit in our culture has grown so much, and where there's growth, then there's money. And where there's money, then there's industry. And when there's industry, there's specialization. And all of these things have a direct effect on how we view sports and how we view the place in sports, which is why I've always been really sort of fascinated by going back and thinking about where sports fit. Like, I played sports every single day for my entire elementary school through middle school through high school. However, I only played on one organized team. I was on the basketball team. I never played on the football team. I never played on the hockey team. I don't even know how to ice skate, but we used to play out there and skate. We used to play floor hockey, and we used to go run around on, playing on the ice. But I didn't learn how to ice skate till a couple of years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, right? So the idea of the purpose of sports. The purpose of sports for us was to hang out with each other. It wasn't to really be good at something to like a professional level, or even a collegiate level, or even a scholastic level. It was not meant for awards or growth. It was something that we all did because we lived in a community and we were all there. The one sport that we actually all sort of played that overlap was maybe the one that you thought you maybe had some opportunity at. And maybe I was different in that. I remember our basketball team, we had to wait for the football season to be over for a couple of those players to come join us. But for the most part, if you were a soccer player or a football player, you played September to, November till Thanksgiving. Then was basketball and hockey season. Then was baseball season. And then the guys who did their traveling team stuff did their stuff in the summertime.
In the summertime, yep. Kate, I mean, you're a D1 athlete. What was your youth sports experience like?
This is where not that Howard was making a point in the opening answer, or the opening time, Howard, that you chimed in about, you think it's always been this way, right? Like, maybe there's never been a middle ground.
Well, no, but when I say always, Kate, what I mean by that isn't the specialization and isn't the industrializing of it. I'm talking about the volume of time. Sports has always taken up a ton of time to play. So when I mean there's no middle ground, I mean, like when you were saying, play 1 day a week or 3 days a week. If you were on the basketball team, that was 6 days. Even in public school, I mean, we were always, during basketball season, we didn't have practice Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We had practice every day from like ninth grade all the way to senior year.
Right?
Yeah. No, I would say eighth grade too.
Yeah, I would say I got very serious about basketball in 8th grade. Yeah. Before then, I played a lot of different things, and I engaged in a lot of free play. Like, some of it.
Yeah, actually, Kate, I think you're right. I think it was 9th grade when I think about it. Once we got your freshman team, basketball, it was an everyday thing. But before that, I don't think it was.
And I can remember, and I think the key thing, the key distinguishing factor for me, in my personal experience with sports, was when I started to become aware of my performance, whether good or bad, letting other people down, letting myself down, like how I felt about sports was now tied to this larger system of pressure. And I didn't start to feel that until freshman year of high school, when you start thinking about AAU and letters and college. Whereas I can see now, and I'm not saying because this is a one-off experience, whereas I can see now my nephew, who just turned 10 years old, feeling like his performance on the baseball team has some lasting effect on his possible ability to be great at this sport in the long term. I don't remember having a lot of emotions tied to like, oh, I'm sure I cared, but I don't remember feeling so much pressure about sports until high school. And like everything in our society, I mean, like, puberty is happening now at age 12 instead of age 14. And so it's like, I guess it's inevitable that some of these other adult-like pressures that kids might be feeling are also starting earlier. So some of it is lining up with the way that our like youth experience is happening for kids, both sports and non-sports. So some of that is lining up, but some of that, the way I think about it too, is like, Howard, you've been talking about like the big business and how once things become big business, it's like its tentacles are down through the youth as well as like specialization's rewarded. So we engage in it. I think the American system of scholarships attached to college is also a huge piece of this because now it's open, the door of possibility is open to everybody. Like, yeah, okay, I may not be the best baseball player and make the major leagues, but I could be Division 3, 2, or
Yeah.
1, and that's going to take the same level of commitment. Therefore, let's spend $100,000 on my traveling baseball.
Yeah, but let's
Let me
not
ask
get
you.
off.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to ask a question. Do you guys believe if we lived in a country, if this country had free higher education, would the emphasis on, chasing sports greatness across youth sports, would it be as pronounced as it is now? Or is this more about people thinking their kid's going to be in the NFL or whatever?
Well, I think it's the same thing to just different degrees, but I was going to say, let's not get off topic here. Part of what we're talking about is the pressures of having an athlete in the family, or is this a good thing? And all of these things turn into this very thing. So to Amin's point, okay, let's go back to California in 1950, 1960, before Reagan. And you have a system where your college is essentially paid for. It's free college, right? So that's the old model. There's still, because where sports fit in the culture has shifted because it's become so much more prominent. There is this question of we want to be in on that. And so as a family, who is showing the most ability, they're going to get the investment. They're going to get the resources. Even if it doesn't mean the NBA, even if it means, like when we first started talking about this topic, I was actually thinking about when I was at the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver. And I was thinking, like, when we did the event in Chicago, the media event before the Olympics started. So in September, the previous September before the Olympics, we all go and meet all the Olympians because we don't care about them except for every 4 years, right? So no one really knows, except for the hockey team, no one knows who they are. And so, or a couple, obviously Lindsey Vonn and company. But talking to the speed skaters and talking to the lugers and talking to not the bobsledders, but talking to the other, athletes, they're talking about how much family commitment has gone into them, especially the figure skaters, that they've been the family business since they were 5 years old. And what is the effect of that on your other siblings? All the resources go to you. All of the interest goes to you. All of the focus of what the family's going to do, where we take our vacations. If we have a vacation, revolves around you and your ability. And that is a piece of it, I think, to your point, Amin, that becomes even more emphasized when there's a jackpot there too. And that jackpot is either a $100,000 college scholarship, it's either world-class ability to go to the next level or to go to the Olympics or the Worlds or whatever.
I think I used to believe that there was a defective flaw in the more European model of how they cultivate sports talent, just the club model that we all now recognize. I used to think, oh, well, and it reflects a little bit more of like the tennis model, probably Howard as well. I used to think, well, we're making kids be professional too soon. And because I wasn't fully aware, I thought in our college model in America, like it kind of splits the difference on that. And maybe the American college model mixed with pros, but we don't really have a whole lot of clubs who work and cultivate young talent, although we're getting more and more. But that's not really the American model. I used to think the American college model was sort of a middle ground. I have started now to realize how much collateral damage is caused by our American college model and the lack of a club system. Because a club system feels more like a place where you're like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. If I'm joining, like a Real Madrid club system as a 11-year-old, obviously I already think that's too early, but there's like a clear-eyed sense of what you're signing up for. Whereas our model in the US feels like it smuggles in a whole lot of negativity that you don't recognize that is happening, whether it's a youth softball system where the coaches make a lot of money on that circuit and treat and their focus is making sure they get enough kids who get college scholarships. Like that is all professionalization of something, but it's smuggled in, so we're unaware of it. So I guess the larger question there that I'm asking is, where do you both land on where our American system of how we develop talent compares to a more European system?
Well, I think it depends on the level of talent we're talking about, right? I mean, I think that the number one thing about all of what we're talking about is the recognition of world-class talent. Mm-hmm. That's very, very different from youth sports, right? They're two totally different like tracks. And when we were first talking,
wouldn't you say now our American youth sports system is like actually not a youth sports system? Everyone thinks it is recognizing world-class talent. It's operating as if that's what it should be doing, is producing world-class talent.
Exactly, and it's not. I mean, that's
Right.
and that's where we're trying to get to in a lot of ways. Where like the USTA Academy and the McEnroe Academy on the tennis side, it's all private. On tennis, it's all private because you've got so many ex-players or so many people who are connected to the tennis industry. And there, it's essentially like a bird dog system, like in the 50s with baseball. You know, the old bird dog scout, the guy who was driving 1,500 miles from city to city to go look for that one kid everybody's talking about. And then that guy made the call. I got a kid out here in Commerce, Oklahoma. His name is Mickey Mantle.
I love it. I love it. What is that bird dog? Like, what's the origin of that word?
Well, the bird dog is looking for
birds.
For birds.
Wait, what's it? Oh, so it's just like a general, like a dog that looks for birds is just a quote unquote bird dog.
And out there beating the bushes and going all the different miles to find.
What are some bird dogs? Beagles.
Isn't it the dog that like it kind of like freezes and like
Ooh,
exactly.
it points. It's like a pointer. It's a pointer.
That's right.
Like okay.
Yeah.
And so that is an old baseball term before the draft, pre-draft, where baseball had hired all of these bird dog scouts to go find them talent. And exactly to find the pointer. And and one of the famous Tom Baird was one of the Yankees' most famous bird dog scouts. He discovered Mickey Mantle. And that guy is supposed to find you and cultivate you and get there. And the same thing works. Now it works a little differently in tennis, where now you're looking, if you're Richard Williams or if you're Corey Goff, if you're one of those, parents who looks and sees that your kid might have a gift. Now you're trying to find, a Bollettieri or someone to discover your kid and say, hey, would you pay to develop my child? Because now we need the resources to turn you into an athlete. And so all of that in the United States system has been private, whereas you look at China or East Germany and the old Soviet Union, where it was state run. But the idea is still the same. And where it starts to work now is, okay, now it's AAU, right? So there are these different sort of models that you have now to essentially reach the same goal. And that same goal is to weed out the actual talent from the youth sports game. And to your point, Kate, I don't think it's the same game. We call it the same game. It's nothing close to the same game.
Right. And I think that's kind of leads us back to what we were at the beginning. We're like, there's no middle ground because youth sports thinks it is supposed to identify world-class talent. Therefore, we have to put it through the ringer to find out who the world-class talent is. So if you just want to enjoy basketball, but I don't even know that these kids exist anymore, because so where would they learn that playing basketball is okay, even if you don't want to be in the NBA? Like, that's not a message you get.
That's right. And so what do we do with that cycle? Somewhere along the way, somebody finds you, or you do what they do in basketball in summer camp, right? We've all been there in summer camp, Kate, where the two coaches, they don't know who anybody is. They throw you all out there and play, and let's see who's good. Right? Let's see who separates themselves from the rest. Who gets to show that they have the ability and the desire to do this. And all of that starts to lead you into something far more structured. And and the structure used to be in the public school system. Now the structure is immediately pulling you out. And the piece of this that we didn't talk about, I know, I mean, you want to go, but the one thing I was also going to say about this too is once you start talking about this, as the article says in the Atlantic, now we start looking at who's got the money to afford it. And now who can actually pay the $3,000 or the $850 a year, whatever that price tag is. I remember one of the first times I went to my mom and told her that being on the basketball team actually cost money. She was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
You know, I was like,
That's,
"I
mean,
we gotta pay."
That's the part that's killing me, man. Like, and these terms are like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, and they're re-upping. I saw the average in there, and when I thought, I was like, "Oh, that sounds high." And then I started doing the math in my head. I'm like, "No, it's just because they're asking it of me every few months as opposed to one lump sum." But yeah,
Well, my son was
it is.
$160 a week to play tennis.
I
And the
mean,
minute I saw his forehand, I was like, I'm not paying
nah.
for this. Yeah, I mean, that's what it cost. It was $160 a week. And, you know, I mean, that's not youth sports. You're going to make a very, very different decision when you start mapping that out. $160 a week for 52 weeks. I'm committing you to something.
Yeah.
That's not fun. I mean, it's fun if you really want to do it, then we make a commitment, but that is so different. It's such a different mindset in terms of even the parent. You don't even want your kid to have fun. You want your kid to be good. You want your kid to show promise, because now we're talking, this is money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is go ahead, Amin.
Oh no, I was just the part where you looked at the European system. The biggest difference is the vertical integration, right? The biggest difference is I'm 10 years old and I'm really good at soccer. I get signed by Liverpool and I go up through the Liverpool system. So it is the same Liverpool that has Mohamed Salah is the same Liverpool that signed me. I'm just levels and levels beneath that. Luka Doncic, being signed by Real Madrid at a very young age and going through the youth system and then getting called up a couple of times to play with the senior team. That's the difference. What we have here is no integration. Mm-hmm. The AAU system is one thing. The high school system is one thing. The college system is one thing. The G League system is one thing. And then you get to the NBA, and now you're using that as an example, or college football. College and high school and Pop Warner or whatever.
It's a big thing.
I
mean, too,
separate.
In tennis, you see that especially, and that's where the USTA is sort of like, maybe we need to streamline this, but you have all these private coaches.
IMG and
exactly Voluntary IMG
and
Academy,
that's the connective tissue is having the money to pay the private coach who works with your kid regardless of what siloed season you are in, whether you're in the AAU season or the high school season.
And what comes with that, Kate, and what comes with that is, okay, I'm gonna underwrite you, and then when you turn pro, I get a piece of your earnings, right? I'm getting
everything's
paid back
transactional
for this.
then.
Absolutely, I'm getting paid back for this. And then you've got the anger on the other side, which is then the parents going, okay, well, USTA, and now the national team wants my kid after I already paid these thousands of dollars to develop him. And so now you're fighting over control, because the root of it is still who's paying to develop this talent once the talent shows they've got they've got ability. And that is the piece, to the other part of this that I just think is so interesting from a family standpoint. When do we make the decision that you're going to be the center of our family? Like, what is that? I liked in the article where it really did talk about what does that do to the sibling relationships? What does that do to the parental relationships? Like Rafa Nadal is the family business. Darryl Strawberry was the family business. Mm-hmm. And everybody is working for you. They're working to promote you. They're working to develop you. Everybody is in on it. You are the family business. And it's been that way for him probably since he was 12 or 13.
the article goes in another direction about the deterioration of the family relationship within itself, parents breaking up, siblings hating each other
Mm-hmm.
because of the existence of the golden child who gets this attention. Coach David Thorpe calls it the royal jelly. You know, you get the
Mm-hmm.
all of the resources are going to this child. We're traveling to. We don't do family vacations anymore. We're going to tournaments and we're doing the trips for
Mm-hmm.
that. We don't have discretionary income because that's all that's going
Because
to
all
this
that money is
child.
going to
Yeah,
the golden child, Tanya Harding.
yeah,
Right.
oh, yeah.
We don't
So
even have any
it
money, but the money we have is going to you.
is
You're
going
the
to
prodigy.
this. Going to the ice skating, going to the rink time, whatever it is. And I just I don't think I ever thought about that. That behind every kind of successful athlete story is perhaps a very strained family relationship. Because I mean, there's the one quote in there is that the woman talked about her husband. We don't even talk to each other anymore.
Yep.
Every
It's
conversation we have is about logistics. Are
yeah.
you picking them up? Are you dropping them off? Like, all that stuff.
Yeah, that one hit me though because that's just married life. Married life is the business of your personal life. I mean, how many times you get married and you're on the phone? It's like, okay, who called? What's this? What are the bills? What came in? Especially if you're on the road. What's this? What's this? It's like, oh, how about a hello to each other first, right? How about we let's not forget why we're here. But then when you add sports to it, when you add and I think what's actually really interesting, the one piece of this that I do sort of that I thought about when I was reading it was it's one thing when you know that I've got a Roger Federer or I've got two girls, I've got Venus and Serena. Like when you see that they are plus, we got plus talent here. And now your eyes get a little big and it starts to make sense because you know that you've got, there's oil in the backyard, right? Because of their talent.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do when you got when you make these same decisions, but you don't have a
Well,
world class talent? You're just
what,
making these decisions.
Howard? Let me ask you a question. The other Williams kids, the ones that aren't tennis superstars, what was their relationship like with Richard and with Venus and
Well,
Serena?
that's a great question because the families sort of merged together. Um, and obviously, one of Venus's sisters, Isha, and Serena's sister Isha, she's there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You see her in the box with Oracene, and so once again, they're the family business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like talking to like let's get Cooper Manning on the show, right? I mean, find the other one who is
Right.
who's not. I remember talking to Rocco Baldelli about this when he was with the Rays because he's over from Rhode Island. We were talking and when he came over to the Red Sox and he was talking about how one of the things that he was really really grateful for was the class element. He says, I'm really really happy I'm middle class. And we were middle to upper middle class because I wasn't the family business. I was just one
Mm.
of many people in our family who was doing something cool, and which is a really different dynamic than knowing you're coming from a really depressed economic situation and knowing you're the golden ticket. We need
Right.
you to succeed. We are investing. It's very very similar to when you take those college tours to the Ivy League schools and they're talking about the difference between a lot of the minority kids and some of the white legacy kids is that that first generation Ivy Leaguer, the whole family, it's the same thing as sports. The whole family put everything into you. You're the one who's going to make it for all of us.
Mm. It's funny because I think a lot about like Stephon Marbury
Mm-hmm.
and the Marbury family was a series. His older brothers were all, this is going to be the one, and then one way or another, it wasn't good enough or got into trouble, whatever. So when Steph came along, this was generation, or not generations, but like multiple Marburys, gambles that had been placed and failed, and finally this was the one. And in that regard, they all were very tight knit and close because of the family business. We all working, we're all working in this. And I but again, all of the brothers played, including his younger brother Zach. So I don't think anyone felt out of touch with the family ethos. But I'm thinking of when we watched King Richard, which feels like a million episodes of Meadowlarkers ago, and there's a scene where Richard Williams, says the character of Richard Williams. I don't know if this happened in real life, but he's like, "Yeah, I don't have time for libraries and stuff like that's the mom's job to handle the other kids and their interests. I'm focused over here with Venus and Serena and their careers."
Their careers as 11-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
That we can see specifically where you're heading.
All right, I think in the last few minutes here, we're not going to fix youth sports, but it has always perplexed me that even when I was growing up, people would talk about youth sports being out of control. And now it is seemingly even more out of control if you're looking at time investment required, often money investment required, pressures on kids. The one place where I could see some relief in the US structure, but it's down the road, is if we do reach a place where the big college football teams break off from the NCAA and start to form like true minor leagues of the NFL. Like you were saying, Amin, if we start to create more verticalized structures in our sports, you could see some relief in the as in like a release valve for some of the kids who want to enjoy sports but not be in like the vertical system of the, say, the Dallas Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, every parent I know who's got anywhere from like a 10 to a 15-year-old, and I talk to them about this, and some of them are in like really high-end competitive programs chasing college scholarships. The parents don't, most of them recognize how ridiculous their behavior is, but they can't stop because they think they can't stop because everyone else is doing it.
And nor do they really want to stop, do they? Because how many times do we see the parents are the ones driving all this stuff because they all see what's at stake? I mean, this always comes back to what are we actually doing here? What are we playing for? There's money at the end of this thing, right? There's money, there's prestige to it. There's the competition. Like the number of times you get there and you say to yourself, I'm not going to be that parent. And then you start seeing the competition kick in. And all of a sudden now you're out there doing the same stuff because this is how human beings react when there's something at stake. And I think that the question of, sort of fixing youth sports, and I've always found that the way it plays itself out usually ends up with the kid. It's the player who ends up bringing sanity to it by saying, I don't want to be part of this, or I found my space in this, and that's where the transition is really interesting when you get to college, because you realize that if you're going to play any type of college sports, I have a friend of mine whose kid is a D3 player. In D3, you're not going to the NBA, right? Very few D3 players. You're not going to the NBA. But to your point earlier, Kate, the commitment is still the same. He's like, I'm not going to the NBA and I'm not playing on national TV. It's not going to be Duke, Carolina. And yet, it's still a 35-hour-a-week practice. I don't get to be a college student. I'm not a college athlete. I mean, I'm a college athlete, but I'm not a college student because I'm not. Look at everybody else getting to be on campus and doing college stuff. And I'm sitting here, and I'm sitting the bench. I'm not even a star.
Yep. And that's the reality of most people's college experience because they are caught in a system where if you believe in true market freedom, a Division III coach isn't going to make $150,000, right? They're not. Most of them are not bringing in like 6,000 people to each game. Most of the D3 programs, I would go watch their games. I would often go watch Union College, which was down the road from me. You're talking about high school bleachers with like 300 people. But because it's part of the NCAA system, you've got like big business weighing on a Division III experience. Mm-hmm. It's not like a true market capital experience where you're like, okay, well, this coach will be volunteer because we're bringing 300 people into the game. Therefore, the pressure that's passed down to me on the hour requirements will be commensurate. That's not the experience. The experience is he's trying to become a Division II coach. He's trying to make the leap to Division I, so he's treating me like I'm Division I because that's the job the head coach wants to get. And so you end up with all these experiences that make no sense for what the athlete might be trying to achieve, like the kind of experience the athlete might be wanting to have, which I think we could probably say is true for all of youth sports up to and through college, most of anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a very interesting dynamic from the parental standpoint as to, you've got a choice to make too. I mean, to what Amin said to start off this entire show, is like, how much do I put into this? How much do I put on them? It always reminds me of reading Andre Agassi's autobio, where he was talking about how much he hated tennis and how much he didn't want to do it and how much his dad drove him and drove him and drove him. And when I came out of that, I started to feel a lot of respect for his dad. And the reason is because I was like, well, wait a minute. You are clearly a generational talent, and Dad recognized that. And if you had your way, you'd be smoking cigarettes behind the 7-Eleven. I mean, and so you do have to sort of balance that whole family engine thing of on the other hand, how do you feel if you're the brother or the sister and we never got to go to Disneyland, or I actually showed a lot of talent playing piano and we were always at your stupid ice skating competitions.
Yeah. Well, because in America, we value sports way above valuing pretty much any other skill somebody might show proficiency at.
No doubt. And especially as the economic stakes get higher. Remember Martellus Bennett, the old tight end for the Patriots and the Giants and a bunch of other teams, and he was talking about how it's such a cultural phenomenon too. He says if you've got the next Bill Gates in your community, people will make fun of him as a nerd. Mm-hmm. They'll never say, hey, don't sleep on him. He's going to be something. But if you show any athletic ability whatsoever, the whole town is talking about you.
That's the thing right there.
How many small towns in America, when you drive in, you drive in, and on the outskirts, they've got birthplace of Charlie Ward, or, it's always right. Somebody won a Heisman or something like that.
I just want to, for that very reason, I want to go to Hibbing, Minnesota. Because I want to know who gets the bigger sign. Is it Kevin McHale or Bob Dylan? It's got to be Dylan, right? Both from the same town. And so that is it for our Meadowlarkers. Kate, you started it. I will finish it. We will see you next week. Next week we're going to do our 52s. Who's going to be our honorary captain for 52? Is it Ray Lewis? Is it CeCe Sabathia?
Oh my God, who is it? Howard, you're so good.
Look at Amin's laughing at me. Who's the 52? It's Ralph Dalton for the old Georgetown Hoyas.
Eric Piatkowski, the Polish rifleman.
Do we have a legit NBA 52?
I'm sure there is. I know Pike because he played for us at Phoenix. That's why.
We'll see y'all next week.